I'm captured on the top pins.
Okay.
Okay.
Come down slowly.
Pull it down.
There we go.
Real easy. Come down.
It may very well be the most complicated mission yet in the 11-year history of the Space Shuttle program. It's certainly one of the most ambitious. After months of training, the stage is set for the 6-man, 1-woman crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour to go after Intelsat 6, a wayward satellite stranded in low Earth orbit.
After I get the capture bar on, I'll hard dock the capture bar with the power tool, and then I'll stop the rotation using the steering wheel, hopefully stop it nice and stable so that Bruce can go in there and grab it.
Imagine working in the weightless environment of space, constructing Space Station Freedom, and you suddenly become unattached from your work platform. What do? Well, stay tuned because we're going to show you some of the self-rescue techniques that just may keep an astronaut from becoming lost in space.
And we'll continue our behind-the-scenes tour at the Kennedy Space Center. This month, a look inside the orbiter processing facilities to see how technicians keep the orbiter shipshape in between flights.
31 seconds. We have a go for auto.
Specialist J. App.
And liftoff of Atlantis and the Galileo spacecraft.
They have preconceived notions. I wanted a chip off. It's not great.
The only thing absent was family and friends, but your
nose gear touchdown.
For May 1992, this is Shuttle Vision, Volume 1, Number 6.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Shuttle Vision from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. I'm Tom Marshall.
And I'm Anita Vogel. We're seated in front of the countdown clock that will tick off the minutes to the launch of America's newest space shuttle. Endeavour is set to make history this month with an ambitious satellite rescue mission. A total of 3 spacewalks are planned for STS-49, the most ever conducted during a single shuttle mission. In a moment, we'll tell you how the astronauts plan to capture and repair a stranded communications satellite in space. And we'll show you how their work in Endeavour's cargo bay will aid future space station assembly missions.
We'll also introduce you to Endeavour's 7-member crew as we take you to the Johnson Space Center in Houston for the pre-flight press briefing. We'll recap the history of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, from its birthplace at the Rockwell plant in Palmdale, California, to its arrival here at KSC, to the flight readiness firing at Pad 39B. And in case you're wondering what to expect when Endeavour makes its roaring debut, we'll fill you in on some of the enhancements that make Endeavour the jewel of NASA's orbiter fleet.
Also coming up, we'll take you behind the scenes at the orbiter processing facilities here at KSC as we check in on Discovery and Atlantis.
But first off this month, our countdown to Endeavour continues as we preview the flight of STS-49. It's enough to give even the most experienced astronaut a sinking feeling. The thought of wrestling a 9,000-pound satellite into the shuttle's cargo bay may be a little unsettling to some, but the crew of STS-49 has been working to perfect such a maneuver for more than a year, and the astronauts are betting their hard work will pay off and won't leave NASA all wet. Determination and hard work have become synonymous with STS-49, the 47th flight for the shuttle program, and the first for Space Shuttle Endeavour. The newest addition to NASA's orbiter fleet is named after the HMS Endeavour. The ship is depicted on the STS-49 crew insignia. The flags flying high on Endeavour's mast bear the colors of the 2 schools that won a nationwide contest to name the new space shuttle. Those 2 schools are Senatobia Middle School in Mississippi and Tallulah Falls School in Georgia. Just as Captain James Cook engaged in unprecedented feats of exploration during his voyage on the original Endeavour, the STS-49 crew will expand the horizons of space operations with a satellite rendezvous and 3 consecutive spacewalks. A pair of astronauts will use the first EVA to retrieve, repair, and deploy the Intelsat 6 communication satellite. The other 2 spacewalks will be used to test possible space station assembly concepts. But the highlight of the 7-day flight is bound to be the capture of Intelsat, a wayward satellite stranded in low Earth orbit.
This is where our story begins, the launch pad of a Titan rocket. The date is March 14, 1990. The payload is Intelsat 6, a telecommunications satellite designed to provide voice, video, and data transfer around the world. This is what the rocket and its satellite payload would have looked like had the deployment been a success. After separating from the second stage of the launch vehicle, Intelsat 6 would have fired its own rocket motor that would help it achieve geostationary orbit. But a malfunction in the launch vehicle left the Titan's second stage attached to the satellite, preventing the ignition of Intelsat's solid rocket motor.
This is Titan Control. We have to make a change in our previous announcement. Mission Director Vic Whitehead just reports that the data that they received here at the control center was not correct. We did not receive confirmation. Repeat, we have not received confirmation of separation at this time.
Because Intelsat 6 is an unstable orbit 100 miles high, it is only a matter of hours before Earth's gravitational pull takes its toll on Intelsat, and it is destroyed upon re-entry into the atmosphere. Through a series of ground commands, engineers at Intelsat are able to jettison the second stage and the satellite's rocket motor.
They are tracking something now which is cylindrically shaped 5 meters by 3.8 meters, which must be us.
And separating from the other then?
We didn't talk about separating, just said this is what they're tracking now is our bird. So.
And any decay of that?
Nothing was said about that at all.
Okay.
Yes.
When you talk to Mix, maybe you can ask about the other object where?
Our second stage compadre.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, there's the second stage in PKM.
After another set of complicated commands from Intelsat's ground stations, engineers are able to raise the satellite's orbit to 300 miles, where it has remained ever since. A pair of nickel-hydrogen batteries supply power to the satellite when it passes through Earth's shadow, but it is designed to rely heavily on solar power. Still, even a steady stream of solar energy isn't going to be enough to propel Intelsat 6 into its operational orbit of 22,300 miles. Intelsat 6 is one of a series of 5 commercial communication satellites that serves 180 countries. It is owned by the International Telecommunications Satellite Organization, which comprises 119 shareholding nations. Intelsat's network of satellites carries 2/3 of the world's overseas telephone traffic and almost all international television. Intelsat 6 was to be stationed high above the Atlantic Ocean, providing, among other things, coverage of the 1992 Summer Olympics in Barcelona.
Intelsat is very short of capacity at the moment, and we desperately need this spacecraft up there providing the international and domestic communications. And we did all the cost-benefit analysis, and they came out positive, so that's why I embarked on this mission in the first place.
With Intelsat 6 now in a stable, though unusable orbit, the consortium contracted with NASA to retrieve and repair the multi-million-dollar satellite. The plan called for a new rocket motor to be carried up into space aboard a shuttle, with an astronaut crew attaching it to the satellite. In 1990, an agreement was reached between Intelsat and NASA, and the planning was underway.
Endeavour's flight begins with a launch into direct orbit insertion and firing of the orbital maneuvering engines to reach the satellite rendezvous orbit of 173 by 199 nautical miles. During Endeavour's first 3 days in space, Commander Dan Brandenstein will fire the orbiter's thrusters to bring it closer to the satellite. A delicate series of maneuvers by both the shuttle and Intelsat 6 will place them in almost identical orbits. This will be the first shuttle rendezvous mission in which both the orbiter and its target satellite will be propelled to a common meeting place in space. Once the shuttle is in orbit, Intelsat ground controllers in Washington, D.C. will begin moving Intelsat 6 to a predetermined area that is within 6 degrees of arc of a 200 by 210 nautical mile orbit. This area is called a control box, and NASA says so long as Intelsat is placed somewhere in this imaginary box in space, Endeavour can rendezvous with it. About 46 hours into the flight, and only 6 hours before Endeavour approaches the satellite, Intelsat's rotation will be slowed from 10.5 to about 6.5 revolutions per minute. As this complicated series of maneuvers continues, Endeavour's crew cabin will be depressurized to 10.2 psi in preparation for the first EVA. In addition, the astronauts will be unpacking and preparing the 4 spacesuits. They will also test the shuttle's robot arm, which will be used to bring the satellite into the payload bay. When Endeavour reaches an orbit of 208 by 212 nautical miles, mission specialist Pierre Thuot and Rick Heeb will begin their spacewalk. Thuot's work will start with the specially designed capture bar. The astronaut will make sure it's in good working order. If he detects a problem, a backup capture bar will be available in the cargo bay. Other special equipment to be used on this mission includes EVA power tools and a portable foot restraint NASA calls a pad. Thuot will use a pad to attach himself to the robot arm. From inside the cabin, mission specialist Bruce Melnick will move the RMS and Thuot within reach of the satellite. Thuot will attach the capture bar to the satellite's aft separation ring. He will use a steering wheel located in the center of the device to stop any remaining satellite rotation and nutation. While Thuot is capturing Intelsat 6, Rick Heeb will be in the cargo bay preparing clamps and electrical connections for the satellite. Once Intelsat is stationary, Thuot will attach the robot arm to the grapple fixture on the end of the capture bar. The RMS will then move Thuot and the satellite into the payload bay for the repair. Endeavour will carry a new 23,000-pound perigee kick motor built by United Technologies Corporation. The PKM will be secured in the payload bay by a cradle built by Hughes Aircraft. During the repair phase, Thuot and Heeb will position themselves on opposite sides of the PKM cradle. The starboard capture bar alignment extension will be installed by Heeb. Next, the PKM's thermal blanket will be removed, and the RMS will move the satellite into position over the docking adapter. When the alignment guides on the spacecraft adapter ring and the capture bar are in place over the cradle, the astronauts will secure the latches that will join the satellite to the docking adapter. They will then mate the 2 electrical umbilicals and release the restraining pins from the push-off springs. Next comes the release of the RMS grapple fixture and capture bar alignment extensions. The bar will then be removed from the satellite, repositioned, and secured to the docking adapter. The astronauts will then activate the staging and boost unit 6-hour timers. This will inhibit ground commands to the spacecraft's perigee stage, preventing any accidental firing of the satellite's new engine while it's still in or near the shuttle. With the satellite now ready for reboost, the astronauts will return to the airlock. At a time, location, and orbiter orientation to be determined by the Intelsat team in Washington, Kathy Thornton will throw a switch in the aft flight deck to deploy the satellite. Upon deployment, a super zip mechanism developed by Lockheed will detach the satellite PKM assembly from the cradle. A set of 4 springs will thrust the satellite from the payload bay at about 0.65 feet per second and 0.67 revolutions per minute. About 35 minutes after deployment, the Intelsat Launch Control Center will increase the satellite spin rate to 10 RPM in preparation for the PKM firing. The rocket motor cannot be fired until the satellite drifts into either the ascending or descending node of the orbit. Now, this can occur at any time from a few hours to up to 12 days after deployment. Once the satellite has reached this position, its rotation will be increased to 35 RPM and the motor will be fired. After another series of ground commands, Intelsat 6 will be placed in geostationary orbit of 22,300 miles. The satellite solar array and appendages will then be deployed, and Intelsat will be put to work high above the Atlantic Ocean.
With the repair and redeployment of the Intelsat satellite behind them, the STS-49 astronauts will turn their attention to the secondary payload in the shuttle's cargo bay. On Flight Day 5, EVA mission specialists Kathy Thornton and Thomas Akers will venture out of the crew cabin to test some of the assembly methods being planned to construct Space Station Freedom later this decade. They'll do it using the assembly of station by extravehicular activity methods payload, otherwise known as ASEM. Using the ASEM equipment in the cargo bay, the crew members plan to construct a truss pyramid. They will also check out how well they can maneuver a large experiment pallet by hand, and they will put the shuttle's robot arm to work to evaluate its performance high above and forward of the cargo bay. The primary piece of ASEM equipment is a multi-purpose experiment support structure. This device, which NASA calls MPES for short, is used to stow some of the hardware that will be used in this experiment. Thornton and Akers will begin the ASEM demonstrations by connecting nodes and struts to assemble the pyramid truss attachment fixture for the MPES. The fixture acts as the space station structure, and the MPES simulates a pallet to be installed. Attached to a portable foot restraint on the robot arm, one crew member will unberth the MPES manually. The crew member and the MPES will then be maneuvered by the remote manipulator system to investigate mass handling capabilities. The MPES will also be passed between two EVA crew members. On Earth, the experiment pallet weighs 3,500 pounds. In space, it weighs nothing at all. Next, the RMS will grapple and position the pallet so the astronauts can attach legs to it and mate it to the truss attachment fixture they previously constructed. Crew members will compare the effectiveness of the robot arm and their own manual efforts. With one astronaut attached to the foot restraint on the RMS and another tethered to the RMS, the robot arm will position Thornton and Akers above Endeavour's crew compartment and cargo bay. There, the astronauts will remove the legs from the MPES carrier, evaluating lighting conditions of both areas. Similar tasks will be carried out on Flight Day 6, when astronauts Pierre Thuet and Rick Heeb return to the cargo bay to work with the ASEM payload. This will mark the third spacewalk for STS-49, the most ever conducted during a single shuttle mission. By conducting EVAs on 3 consecutive days, Endeavour's crew will be illustrating NASA's ability to utilize astronaut teams repeatedly for space station assembly. During the RMS maneuvers, the astronauts will also test a series of devices and techniques for getting back on board the space station in case they accidentally lose contact with an EVA workstation. The first device is what NASA calls an astro rope. It's a 20-foot nylon rope with a pair of cleats that is thrown by hand and wraps around a structure. The next is a rigid telescoping pole that's 12 feet long. It features a grapple fixture at the top of the pole and tripod legs that are manually extended. NASA's bi-stem pole is deployed and retracted using an EVA power tool. It has 2 strips of coiled spring steel that form a pole 20 feet long. It too has a grapple fixture on one end, and it is capable of unlimited grapple attempts. The inflatable pole is a 12-foot cloth tube that is inflated with compressed nitrogen. Once attached to the desired object, the pole is deflated and the user pulls himself to the object with a hand-over-hand approach. The inflatable pole cannot be reused. And finally, the astronauts will try out the crew propulsive device. It's a handheld maneuvering unit powered by nitrogen. Test and evaluation of the crew propulsive device, the bi-stem, and the inflatable pole are scheduled for Flight Days 5 and 6. The astro rope and the telescoping pole will be evaluated as time permits during the spacewalks. This crew self-rescue hardware was developed by the Crew and Thermal Systems Division at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. The ASEM payload, meanwhile, is sponsored not only by JSC, but NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center and the Langley Research Center.
STS-49 brings together a veteran astronaut crew. All but one crew member, pilot Kevin Chilton, have flown on previous shuttle missions. The flight is commanded by Daniel C. Brandenstein, who has been chief of the astronaut office since 1987. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics and physics from the University of Wisconsin at River Falls. After graduation, he became an aviator in the U.S. Navy, flying 192 combat missions in the Vietnam War. Brandenstein later tested weapon systems and tactics aboard the A-6 aircraft. After graduation from the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School, he conducted tests of electronic warfare systems in various naval aircraft. Brandenstein has logged more than 6,300 hours of flying time. He became an astronaut in 1978 and flew as a pilot on STS-8, the first night launch and landing of a shuttle. Brandenstein went on to serve as commander for 51G in 1985 and STS-32 in 1990. He is 49 years old. Pilot Kevin P. Chilton is a native of Los Angeles. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Engineering Sciences from the Air Force Academy and a Master's degree in Mechanical Engineering from Columbia University. After graduating from Air Force pilot training, Chilton served as a combat-ready pilot and instructor. He also conducted weapons and systems tests in all models of the F-15 and F-4. He's logged more than 3,000 hours of flying time in more than 20 different types of aircraft. Chilton became an astronaut in 1988. This is the first space flight for the 37-year-old astronaut. Mission Specialist 1, Richard J. Heeb, was born in Jamestown, North Dakota. He received a Bachelor of Arts degree in mathematics and physics from Northwest Nazarene College. He went on to earn a master's degree from the University of Colorado. Following graduation, Heeb joined NASA and worked in various areas of flight operations, including crew development and spacecraft rendezvous procedures. Heeb became an astronaut in 1986 and flew aboard STS-39 in 1991. He is 36 years old. Mission Specialist 2, Bruce E. Melnick, was born in New York City, but considers Clearwater, Florida to be his hometown. Melnick earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Engineering from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy and a Master's degree in Aeronautical Systems from the University of West Florida. He served 7 years as a Coast Guard rescue pilot and later conducted many of the tests on the Coast Guard's Dolphin helicopter. Melnick has logged more than 4,900 hours of flying time. He became an astronaut in 1988 and served as a mission specialist for STS-41 in 1990. His age is 42. Mission Specialist 3, Pierre J. Thuet, was born in Groton, Connecticut, but calls Fairfax, Virginia and New Bedford, Massachusetts home. He received his bachelor's degree in physics from the U.S. Naval Academy and a master's in systems management from the University of Southern California. Thuet flew the F-14 Tomcat and made deployments to the Mediterranean and Caribbean seas while serving aboard the USS John F. Kennedy and the USS Independence. He's recorded more than 2,700 hours of flying time. Thuet became an astronaut in 1986, flying as a mission specialist aboard DoD flight STS-36 in 1990. He is 37 years old. Catherine C. Thornton is Mission Specialist 4. She was born in Montgomery, Alabama, and earned a Bachelor of Science degree in physics from Auburn University. She went on to receive a master's and doctorate of philosophy degrees in physics from the University of Virginia. Thornton was awarded a NATO postdoctoral fellowship at the Max Planck Institute for Nuclear Physics in Heidelberg, Germany. She later worked as a physicist at the U.S. Army Foreign Science and Space Technology Center. Thornton, who became an astronaut in 1985, was a mission specialist aboard STS-33 in 1989. Thornton is 39. And Mission Specialist 5, Thomas D. Akers, was born in St. Louis, but was raised and educated in his hometown of Eminence, Missouri. He received Bachelor and Master of Science degrees in Applied Mathematics from the University of Missouri. Akers worked 4 years as a high school principal before joining the Air Force. As a flight test engineer, he worked on several weapons deployment programs while flying the F-4 and T-38. After becoming an astronaut in 1988, Akers flew aboard STS-41 in 1990. He is 41 years old. During their pre-flight press conference in Houston, the STS-49 crew members talked about their ambitious mission.
We have 2 separate crews we're trying to train. In addition, we didn't mention, Tom is trained as Rick's backup on Intelsat. Rick's trained as my backup on Intelsat. So if I have a bad meal the night before and I don't feel too good the next day and I can't go out, Rick can jump in and do my job. Tom can That's an idea. Wait a minute.
You probably cook for yourself that day.
I'll cook for myself that night, right? But anyway, so there's quite a bit more training. STS-37, the last EVA we did, one of the things Jerry and Jay talked to us about afterwards is one of the things you need to do as you start getting close is do lots of runs, lots of long runs, 6-hour runs for conditioning. So we're similar to them in that respect, in that for the last 2 months or so we will be doing at least 1 run a week, each team, in the wet that are 6 hours long for conditioning. We've pretty much got all our procedures down, and we really have the timeline down real well. Now it's just a case of maintaining that conditioning that you get from working in the suit for long periods of time. So
this one's a little different in that on this one we have a human between the vehicle and the satellite, so it'll probably be a little more tense. But and I think you know, relief and joy are probably the 2 things that come to mind when you successfully complete it.
We're getting better and better at cramming more things into the orbiter. You know, we're learning how to do things, and just for this mission, we'd never tried putting 4 spacesuits in the airlock, and there we have it. We've got 4 of them in there. It's tight, but it fits. In fact, somebody even won an award for proving that it could be done. And so, you know, a lot of people have worked real hard at finding ways to fit more things in the orbiter.
And in addition, we each got to take a shirt and a pair of socks for every single day, so we're in good shape.
With such an ambitious mission planned, it's fitting that NASA's newest and most advanced space shuttle has been assigned the flight of STS-49. The launch of the Space Shuttle Endeavour will be another first for this precedent-setting mission. Endeavour was constructed here, at Rockwell International's Orbiter Assembly Facility in Palmdale, California. More than 250 major subcontractors and thousands of associated pliers across the country performed work on Endeavour's components. One by one, the pieces were brought together in this high-desert hangar and assembled for flight. The wings and elevons came from the Grumman Corporation in New York, the orbital maneuvering system pods from McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis, and the crew compartment came from Rockwell's sister plant in Downey, California. Some of Endeavour's basic elements, such as the mid-fuselage and vertical stabilizer, were pre-built under a 1983 contract to construct spare parts. This in case NASA needed to repair or replace primary components on any of its operational orbiters. But those spare parts wouldn't be put to use until the summer of 1987, when President Reagan gave the go-ahead to build a new orbiter. NASA referred to the new space shuttle as Orbiter 105, or OV-105. But it would be school children from across the nation who would give OV-105 its name. Thanks to legislation authored by Florida Congressman Tom Lewis, the Orbiter Naming Program was established to cultivate interest in space exploration among young people. Students were given the task of coming up with possible names for the new shuttle. Like NASA's other orbiters, OV-105 was to be named after a sea vessel used in research and exploration. In honor of the 51L crew, NASA retired the name Challenger. In May 1989, President Bush selected and announced the winning name based on recommendations made by the NASA administrator. The winning entry was Endeavour, named after the ship commanded by British explorer Captain James Cook. Cook sailed the HMS Endeavour on his first scientific expedition to the South Pacific. This modern-day Endeavour is a little more advanced than Captain Cook's ship, but they both share a common purpose: the exploration of mankind's environment. Several new and improved devices have been outfitted on the Space Shuttle Endeavour to carry out her missions. Among the upgrades, advanced general-purpose computers. The updated computers have more than twice the memory and 3 times the processing speed of their predecessors. Improved nose-wheel steering mechanisms have also been installed on the orbiter. This new system features a second command channel, which will be used as a backup. In addition, a valve has been installed in the hydraulic system to a switch in a secondary network in case the first one fails. A series of extended duration orbiter modifications will allow Endeavour to stay in orbit for up to 28 days. Although Endeavour has not been outfitted with the additional nitrogen tanks needed to support such a mission, its internal wiring and plumbing will support it when it becomes necessary. Endeavour rolled off the assembly line in Palmdale on April 25, 1991. The STS-49 crew was on hand for the rollout ceremony, and Commander Daniel Brandenstein was awarded a piece of the original Endeavour. This remnant of Captain Cook's ship will be carried aboard the Shuttle Endeavour on its maiden flight. From California, it was off to the Kennedy Space Center, where Endeavour underwent a series of checkouts before it was cleared for flight. Finally, on March 13th of this year, Endeavour was rolled out of the vehicle assembly building and headed to the launch pad. Its flight readiness firing took place in April, and although 3 of its main engines had to be replaced, NASA says its newest orbiter, and perhaps its last, will be ready for launch on May 7th. The Space Shuttle Endeavour is scheduled to return to the Dryden Flight Research Facility at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Richard Horman is there now with that part of the story. Richard?
Thanks, Anita. Here at Edwards, it's almost business as usual. The recovery teams that greet the orbiters after touchdown will be standing by waiting for Endeavour's return. They will be joined by an estimated 10,000 spectators who will make the trek here to Edwards to welcome home America's newest space shuttle. After nearly 7 full days in space, Endeavour is scheduled to touch down on concrete runway 22. It is a landing strip that has been used quite often by the shuttle fleet. But this is not going to be any ordinary touchdown. If all goes as planned, you can expect Endeavour to add a new twist to shuttle landings. As graceful as they may seem, space shuttle landings have not been without incident. When the Space Shuttle Discovery touched down in Florida in 1985, it blew out a main landing gear tire. The orbiter was able to roll to a safe stop without damaging the vehicle or hurting the crew, but it was the type of event that makes NASA managers very nervous. But when you consider the orbiter is traveling more than 200 miles per hour at touchdown, you can understand why. Just about all of the problems encountered at shuttle landings have been associated with the orbiter's troublesome brakes and steering system. New carbon brakes and improved nose-wheel steering mechanisms have been used on recent flights. But when Endeavour touches down at the conclusion of STS-49, it will show off perhaps the most dramatic improvement yet, a 40-foot diameter drag chute canopy that will shoot out from below the orbiter's tail. The canopy will be deployed after main gear and nose gear touchdown. The main drag chute and a 9-foot diameter pilot chute are deployed by a small mortar that is fired from a compartment that has been added to the bottom of the vertical stabilizer. The chute will be jettisoned when the spacecraft slows to less than 60 knots. The drag chute is deployed using a pair of switches inside the orbiter's cockpit. The canopy is expected to not only reduce stress on the shuttle's brakes, it will decrease the orbiter's rollout distance by as much as 2,000 feet, making landings at KSC's 15,000-foot runway that much safer. Although Endeavour will be the first orbiter to use a drag chute, it's just a matter of time before all 4 orbiters have one. In fact, Columbia has already been modified to carry one, and will be used at the conclusion of STS-50 in July. Discovery will use one when it returns to the fleet in December, and Atlantis' drag chute is scheduled to debut in June 1993. Well, before we return to Florida, I'd like to bring you up to date on some other items making news this month. NASA has set June 4th as the launch date of the Extreme Ultraviolet Explorer. The satellite is designed to observe astronomical objects at extreme ultraviolet wavelengths. This is one of the least studied regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. The satellite will be placed in orbit by an Air Force Delta II rocket, which will be launched from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. Shuttle Vision will bring you coverage of the launch and mission next month. There are new revelations from the Magellan spacecraft, which is in orbit around Venus. Project scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena report massive landslides have been detected on the planet's surface. 4 new images beamed to Earth from Magellan show evidence of ground movement similar to the landslides we encounter here on Earth. The most dramatic landslides on Venus are seen beneath the slopes of volcanoes and may have formed much like the Mount St. Helens eruption in Washington in 1980. Landslides occur on steep slopes and are usually triggered by seismic activity. The larger landslides on Venus spread 18 miles across the surface. Because erosion on Venus is rare due to the lack of water on the surface, landslides are an important mechanism in wearing down that planet's mountain regions. The longest landslides known to man can be found on Earth. Undersea slides reach more than 200 miles in length. Martian landslides are next in size. They reach more than 60 miles. As for Venus, the largest landslides there extend about 30 miles. Incidentally, Magellan's work isn't over yet. Although the satellite has mapped more than 97% of the planet's surface, it is continuing to send back a wealth of data that scientists will be poring over for years to come. Former NASA Administrator Thomas Paine is dead at the age of 70. Paine, who served as head of the space agency during the first several moon landings, succumbed to cancer on May 4th. In addition to serving as NASA's third administrator, Paine was the chairman of the National Commission on Space in the mid-1980s. Paine is the third former NASA administrator to die within the last 6 months. James Fletcher died in December, and James Webb in February. Dan Golden hailed the work of his predecessors, saying, quote, "Their accomplishments and legacies will long endure," end quote. While talking about Dan Golden, the current NASA administrator has appointed 6 people to senior management positions. Major General Jeremiah Pearson III has been named Associate Administrator in charge of the Office of Spaceflight. Pearson replaces William Lenore, who left the space agency on May 4th. In this position, Pearson will oversee management of the Space Shuttle program, Space Lab operations, and planning for Space Station Freedom. 3 of the other appointments went to 1 former and 2 current astronauts. Brian D. O'Connor, who flew aboard 61B in 1985 and STS-40 in 1991, was named Deputy Associate Administrator for the Office of Spaceflight. Charlie Bolden, who most recently served as commander of STS-45 in March, was appointed to the new position of Assistant Deputy Administrator. According to a statement released by headquarters, Bolden will be responsible for integrating and ensuring the effective accomplishment of the Total Quality Management Review. Bolden also served as pilot for Mission 61C in 1986 and STS-31 in 1990. And Frederick D. Gregory was named Associate Administrator for the Office of Safety and Mission Quality. Gregory replaces George Rodney, who is retiring in June. Gregory will be responsible for the safety and mission quality for all NASA programs and activities. Gregory is a veteran of 3 shuttle missions, 51B in 1985, STS-33 in 1989, and STS-44 in 1991. The other 2 appointments went to Allison McNally, who was named an executive officer, and Deidre Lee, who was named executive assistant to the deputy administrator. Well, as veteran astronauts are promoted to management positions and others leave the space agency for various reasons, NASA must replenish its pool of available crew members. Well, the space agency has done just that. NASA has announced the selection of 19 new astronaut candidates for the shuttle program. This year's group consists of 4 pilot candidates and 15 mission specialist candidates. They were chosen from more than 2,000 qualified applicants, and the group includes 10 military officers and 9 civilians. Here now is a look at the names and hometowns of these new astronaut candidates. The future astronauts will report to the Johnson Space Center in August to begin a year of training and evaluation. They will then receive technical assignments before finally being selected for a flight. Congratulations to all of you. NASA has given its stamp of approval to a new set of commemorative stamps that depict accomplishments in space by both the United States and the former Soviet Union. The block of 4 29-cent stamps went on sale May 29th in Des Plaines, Illinois. The 4 designs are based on a painting prepared jointly by a U.S. designer and a Russian designer. Among the spacecraft depicted in the stamps, the Apollo and Soyuz, the American Space Shuttle, and a possible joint mission to Mars between the United States and Russia. Now these are commemorative stamps, which means there are a limited number in circulation. So if you haven't purchased your space stamps yet, you better head over to your local post office before they run out. Well, finally from Edwards, more proof that our problems on Earth are impacting our presence in space, or at least the discussion of it. A 3-day meeting of the Space Agency Forum on the International Space Year had to be canceled in early May when transportation was disrupted near the meeting area. The forum was to take place in Pasadena, one of several Southern California communities affected by the LA riots. Well, that's it from the Dryden Flight Research Facility at Edwards Air Force Base. Back to Tom and Anita at the Kennedy Space Center in a moment.
Normally each month we bring you the orbiter updates. Well, this month something special. We took a behind-the-scenes look at the orbiter processing facilities. We want you to come along.
When a space shuttle isn't sitting out on a launch pad or in orbit, you will probably find it here, at the orbiter processing facility at the Kennedy Space Center. Located just a few hundred yards away from the Mammoth Vehicle Assembly Building, the OPF is home to hundreds of space workers who keep the orbiters tuned up in between flights. We are walking through one of the hallways in the original orbiter processing facility, which can accommodate 2 orbiters at a time. The vehicles are kept in 2 separate working areas, designated as High Bays 1 and 2. Another high bay was recently constructed to hold a 3rd orbiter, but that's located in a separate nearby building. We are about to enter High Bay 1, where the Space Shuttle Atlantis is being stored. To enter the work facility, employees must first leave their identification badges on a board just outside the double doors. This makes it easier to tell who is inside the high bay at any given time. They then use a magnetic strip card to gain access into the work area. Once inside, the engineers, technicians, and staff personnel report to their respective stations and its right to work. On the date of our visit, Atlantis was just back from space, having landed at KSC just a few days earlier. The orbiter had just completed STS-45, the flight of Atlas I. Today, a brightly lit sign alerts employees that power is being fed to the orbiter. This power will help technicians who are busy checking out the orbiter's hydraulic system and removing the Atlas I payload from the cargo bay. Employees are also continuing their post-flight inspections of the orbiter and replacing tiles that were damaged during the flight. A maze of work platforms enshroud the orbiter from top to bottom, so you never get a complete look at the shuttle when it's in the OPF. You simply see a nose here, a wing there, and you just assume the rest of the orbiter is up there somewhere. Working just below the forward fuselage, Atlantis' nose gear is being looked at, and any aberrations are being recorded. If any of the wiring needs to be replaced, this is where it will be done. A nearby workstation is being used to document the findings. It also serves as a giant toolbox for the space-age mechanics. Just a few feet from the nose section, a huge payload canister has been opened to store the Atlas I payload. The experiment pallet is still inside the cargo bay, but in a couple of hours it will be lifted out and placed in the canister. Now, from our vantage point on the floor, it's difficult to see what's going on above us, but a network of cameras mounted in the high bay provide a bird's-eye view of the activity. Beneath Atlantis, workers have made a complete inspection of the orbiter's delicate tiles and are now in the process of replacing those that were damaged during the flight. Tens of thousands of protective tiles and thermal insulation blankets cover the orbiters. Together, they provide a vital lifeline to the vehicle and crew. Without them, the shuttle would burn up upon re-entering the Earth's unforgiving atmosphere. When the Space Shuttle Columbia was built, nearly 32,000 tiles were used to protect the orbiter. Today, larger thermal blankets are used on the newer orbiter's top sections, but the dark-colored heat shields can still be found on the underbellies and noses of all the shuttles. Each tile has its own computer code, which provides the data needed to manufacture and locate a replacement tile. Believe it or not, NASA says no 2 tiles are alike, and each must be installed by hand, gloved hand that is. Workers are careful not to touch the heat shields with their bare fingers because the oil on their skin can actually be damaging. Raindrops can also pierce the tiles, which is one of the reasons you'll never see an orbiter launch or land in the rain. No one in the OPF takes the tiles for granted, and great care and attention are paid to them. Working next to the tile technicians is a fiber optics team that is checking for cracks or other damage to not only the tiles, but the orbiter frame itself. By running a mini camera along the edge of the wings where the elevons are connected, this worker is able to detect early signs of deterioration. As he slides the camera forward, an image appears on a TV monitor just below him. When working in and around the orbiters, employees must tether any loose jewelry to their bodies. Rings, watches, and bracelets are all taped to prevent any accidental damage to the vehicle. The tape down also prevents a worker from getting entangled in wiring or other orbiter equipment. It's all part of a safety campaign at KSC, which has been dubbed FOD, Foreign Object Debris. The signs are everywhere, and so is the tape. The OPF is never in short supply of the amenities needed to work on the shuttle. There's also a safety shower in case an employee comes into contact with a harmful chemical. As for the orbiter's safety, there's a hurricane lock on the entrance that's used to roll the vehicle in and out of the OPF. We are now in High Bay 2, where the Space Shuttle Discovery is undergoing major modifications. Several of the orbiter's main components have been disassembled to be inspected and repaired. This is the rear flap, which has been set aside so it can be outfitted with new tiles. The pitting and scarring is testament to Discovery's 8 years of service. In addition to the tiles, hundreds of new thermal blankets are being prepared to be installed on the orbiter. Before they can go on, each blanket must be inspected and cataloged.
Richard, pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Really a good shot for you all would be to get, because one of the things we do here a lot is work with the tanks. Yeah. And I noticed that he's filming right now, too.
Occasionally, you may run into an astronaut or two in the OPF. This day, Carl Waltz flew from Houston to check up on Discovery. Waltz will be flying aboard the orbiter next year for mission STS-51. Visits by the astronauts are a big morale boost for the employees, who are able to make a personal connection to their work. And yet, even if the astronauts didn't visit KSC, you get the feeling the space workers would be just as dedicated anyway. After all, the signs are everywhere. Richard Horman, Shuttle Vision.
Well, it's that time again to dig into the Shuttle Vision mailbag. Our first letter comes to us from David G. Uline of Utica, Michigan. Mr. Uline writes, "Dear Shuttle Vision, today I received my trial tape of Shuttle Vision, and I want you to know that I am very pleased with your coverage in the March 1992 issue. This is exactly what I have been looking for. The quality and contents are excellent. I really enjoyed the segment on the Endeavour rollout to Pad 39B. Is it possible that you would have coverage of the launches from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station of the Delta, Titan, and Atlas missions that are also in the space effort?" Well, Mr. Uline, we're happy to report that Shuttle Vision will be expanding its coverage in the coming months to include those unmanned missions. Among the more prominent satellites awaiting launch is the Mars Observer, which is scheduled to ride aboard a Titan III rocket in September. You can look forward to coverage of the Mars Observer and other payloads in upcoming editions of Shuttle Vision.
Our next letter comes to us from Juneau, Alaska. Viewer Dave Fowler writes, "Dear Shuttle Vision, I've been enjoying Volume 1, Number 4 of Shuttle Vision. However, I think you need to employ a fact checker. It was stated that Atlas 1 was to have flown next after 51L. My buddy, Big John McBride, who was to command 61E at the time, would be surprised to hear that. He was charged with Astro 1, not Atlas 1. At that point, Atlas was known as EOM 1/2 on 61H, then scheduled for late summer 1986. Byron Lichtenberg was the only prime crew member to survive the transition to Atlas." Well, Mr. Fowler, you are absolutely right. And besides being a little red-faced, the Shuttle Vision Fact Finder is happy to share this with us. It's the official insignia for the original Astro 1 mission in 1986. This is the crew logo for 61E, the flight you mentioned. This mission was supposed to follow 51L, Challenger's last flight. Once the shuttle flights resumed in 1988, the Astro 1 payload was reassigned to mission STS-35, a flight of the Space Shuttle Columbia that took place in December 1990. This is the insignia for that flight. As you can tell by the names on the insignias, 4 of the crew members assigned to the original mission were still a part of Astro 1 when it finally launched 4 years later. They are Jeffrey Hoffman, Robert Parker, Samuel Durrance, and Ronald Parise. And in case you're wondering, the Astro 1 payload consisted of a group of ultraviolet telescopes and a broadband X-ray telescope. Thank you, Dave Fowler, for bringing this oversight to our attention. We'll be sending you a decal of the original Astro 1 mission. There are only a few of these rare decals still in circulation, and if there are any other Shuttle Vision viewers out there who would like to have one, we have 10 more to give away. You can receive your free 61E decal by correctly answering this shuttle trivia question. What orbiter was originally assigned to carry Astro 1 into space in 1986? We told you Columbia finally carried out the mission in 1990. Now you tell us what orbiter was supposed to launch with Astro 1 in 1986. You can send your response to Shuttle Trivia in care of Shuttle Vision, P.O. Box 92012, Industry, California 91715, 2012. Now, the first 10 viewers who send in a letter and answer correctly will receive a decal. Only one response per viewer, please, and faxed responses will not be accepted. But you can use the fax number for all other correspondence, and we want you to keep those letters coming. That fax number, by the way, is area code 818-333-4709.
While talking about shuttle flights, here's a quick look at some of the missions that will be making news this summer. The Space Shuttle Columbia will return to service with STS-50, the first flight of the United States Microgravity Laboratory. The record-setting 13-day mission is slated for launch on June 25th. From left to right, the crew consists of Mission Specialist Ellen Baker, Pilot Kenneth Bowersox, Payload Commander Bonnie Dunbar, Commander Richard Richards, Mission Specialist Carl Meade, and Payload Specialists Eugene Trin and Lawrence DeLucas. Columbia will support its newly installed drag chute when it touches down at Edwards Air Force Base in California. The Space Shuttle Atlantis, meanwhile, is gearing up for STS-46. The tethered satellite system will be the primary payload aboard this flight, which NASA hopes to launch in late July. The 7-day flight will be commanded by Lauren Shriver, while Andrew Allen will serve as pilot. Payload commander is Jeffrey Hoffman. Franklin Cheng Diaz, Marcia Ivins, and Claude Nicolier are mission specialists, while Franco Malerba will be the only payload specialist. Atlantis is scheduled to return to the shuttle landing facility at KSC. And Endeavour will make its second flight into space in September. With Spacelab J tucked in its cargo bay, the orbiter will conduct a 7-day mission. The commander for the flight is Robert Hoot Gibson. Curtis Brown Jr. is the pilot. Mark Lee will be the payload commander, while Jay Apt, Jan Davis, and Mae Jemison fly as mission specialists. Payload specialist is Mamoru Mari. STS-47 will be the 50th flight of the shuttle program and is slated to land in Florida. That's going to wrap up another edition of Shuttle Vision. Well, Tom, we've been here at KSC for a few days now, and isn't it interesting to see all the work that goes on behind the scenes that people wouldn't ordinarily see?
That's right. There's some 19,000 employees here at Kennedy Space Center. I'd always assumed that they were all NASA employees. Come to find out, there are only about 2,500 NASA employees who work here. The rest are subcontractors. For example, all of the people that we saw in the package piece at the orbiter processor facility, every single one of those, short of the astronauts, are, I should say, Lockheed employees.
That's right, and they're all waiting to see next month's launch of the newest orbiter, Endeavour.
We know you're waiting for the liftoff as well, so join us next month for Shuttle Vision. We'll have complete mission coverage on Endeavour's flight, including dramatic footage of the Intelsat capture and repair. We'll see space history in the making as an unprecedented 3-man spacewalking team captures the wayward satellite with their gloved hands. It's one episode of Shuttle Vision you won't want to miss.
Then coming up in our July edition, our exclusive interview with NASA Administrator Dan Golden. Find out what the head of NASA has in store for the space program as he speaks directly to the viewers of Shuttle Vision. We'll also have coverage of STS-50, and we'll show you how NASA technology is being put to use in hospitals where patients are undergoing joint replacement surgery.
And August heats up with a profile of the X-30 National Aerospace Plane. Students at Mississippi State University have constructed a 50-foot mock-up of the air and spacecraft, which is being designed to take off like an airplane and fly into Earth orbit. We'll give you a sneak preview of the X-30 before it arrives in Washington for the World Space Congress later this summer. Stay tuned for these stories and much, much more this summer on Shuttle Vision. I'm Tom Marshall.
And I'm Anita Vogel. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.